So as our eyes adjust, when you have your questions, just put your hands up and I will repeat them for the benefit of everyone. But I'll just get things started and ask the question that I know everyone has on their minds. Can you just give us an update on what's happening with the girls now? And just give us the rundown since you're close, Paul.
Yeah, so since we finished filming, Victor is officially out of Femen. Yeah. And Inna Shevchenko, who you see in the final stage, she's taken over as the leader, kind of, and they're based in Paris now. She's applying for asylum there. She was going to be here tonight, but she has to do mandatory French class, so she's stuck there. So she was a bit sad about that. And the other girls, Sasha and a few others, are stuck there too due to asylum papers and things like that. And yeah, so it's all changing for the better. And they've made, it's a whole new organization. And I'm really proud of what they've been able to achieve in the last year. Yeah.
I think that was a big collective sigh of, oh, thank God, from everyone. Okay, so with the questions, just put your hands straight on up, right in the back. Yep. Question is, where was the money coming from?
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, a lot of it is what they were saying, like kind of sex tourists and men online donate a lot of cash. To be honest, I didn't go too far into the money thing because it was a little dangerous. I think it's tied up with this kind of corrupt Ukrainian government. And I heard lots of rumors and I'd press the girls on it and they would sort of tell me on bits and pieces, but it was all very shady. But I don't know, I'd like to think it's just coming from people online and supporters and whatnot. But there is, I was focusing more on sort of the gender roles and the idea of patriarchy and kind of less on the money question because I didn't really want to be killed.
So selfish, Kitty. Okay, right in the middle. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about how their mandate's going to change now that it's not run by a man?
Yeah.
Now that it's not run by a man, can you talk to us a little bit about how their women date might change?
Yeah, women date. No, it's a very, it's all shapes and sizes, all nationalities, all different crazy kinds of girls. Like, it's really, it's very different to what it was. I mean, and I spent, luckily enough, before we premiered at Venice, and I spent the week before we premiered in Paris, working with Femen France and shooting for them. And I was amazed by the girls there. They were all really kind of strong, intelligent, opinionated. They were all studying politics. They had an interest in what they were doing. And it really felt like, wow, this is something real. This is something very different to what I saw in Ukraine. And the Femen France just think this is all lies. They can't understand how the movement was born out of this kind of country and this kind of patriarchal. They just refuse to acknowledge that this happened. But all the Ukrainian girls know exactly what happens in Ukraine, and yeah, this is a real reflection of what goes on in that country. But yeah, anyone can be Femen now, which is lovely.
Tops off, everyone.
Yeah.
Right in the back. Yep.
This seems a very sort of, as a society, this seems a very sort of basic first wave feminism coming out of Ukraine. Do they see themselves as the sort of person who's referring to themselves as this new sort of feminism, or Victor would refer to themselves as this new sort of feminism? And it seems this very sort of primary kind of feminism, kind of basic.
So the question is about new wave feminism, the way they self-describe, and what appears to be first wave feminism. Do they have that kind of concept of difference?
The way I've heard it being pitched is that they kind of had first wave feminism in the Soviet Union, where women could vote and they had a bit of power and they were taking on roles and whatnot, but they missed the second wave in a lot of ways because they were sort of stuck behind the Iron Curtain. So they sort of see themselves, this is like almost like they missed a lot of, I don't know, it became kind of like this new wave because they hadn't experienced the second wave of feminism in some ways. It's not the first wave, it's a whole,
a vacuum wave.
Yeah, it's its own wave. It's very strange. But yeah, in terms of what the girls know very little about, I think, feminism in general. Victor would read them texts, and there's a particular text by August Bebel called Woman and Socialism, and he would read them that. And I think that a lot of their kind of, I don't know, schooling was from texts that he'd read, Marxist texts and whatnot to them. And in these early days when he had this, like, it all sort of started in a cultural center in Khmelnytsky, which is a town in western Ukraine. And he would sort of just meet with the girls and read to them. And then that sort of movement was born out of that. They took them to the streets, then they took more clothes off, and they realized, oh, we can get more press if we do this and if we're sexier. And then it just sort of went crazy. So yeah, it's a strange, yeah, it's Victor's idea of what feminism is basically what this movement is promoting.
Yes.
How long did it take you to make the film, and what particular challenges did you have being in the Ukraine?
How long did it take you to make the film, and what challenges did you have being in Ukraine?
I was there for about 14 months all up shooting, and I mean the challenges in Ukraine, it's pretty crazy shooting in Ukraine. I mean, there's no laws, like I shouldn't admit that publicly, but I don't have release forms because there's no real copyright laws. Like a lot of things are easier, there's no location form, like you can just kind of get away with murder in some ways. But I was arrested a lot. Not murder, but most things, if you pay people off. No, I was arrested about 8 times. I was abducted by the KGB in Belarus and spent a lot of time in confinement. Like, I mean, my Australian passport got me out of a lot. They didn't understand the kangaroo on the front. They're like, what is that? So, yeah, they thought it was cute and funny, and they'd bring all the policemen in, and I'd tell them Australian stories, and they'd kind of let me go eventually. So I never felt like I was in that much danger, but yeah, it's pretty hairy at times. And what they're doing, we were being, like, at times followed by police every day, tracked, our phones were hacked, and Facebook was hacked, and things like that. So it was really, I mean, it was intense, and it was very cold. I'm from Australia, it was -30 there, like, little things like that as well, but yeah. It's an intense country to live in.
Congratulations on telling that story.
Thank you.
Okay, that hand right there. Can you tell us a little bit about what they've been able to achieve, perhaps the positives that have come from what they did?
Yeah, people, like, yeah, it's up for debate, but really the raising awareness is what they do best. And I think young girls in Ukraine really had no idea what feminism was, and they've since, like in the last 5 years, they've seen Femen on the television, and they've seen them all over the news. And whether their methods are provocative, yes, but they're getting people talking about issues, and I think that's really important, and especially like country Ukraine, which for such a long time, it's going through a very different phase now, but was very kind of closed off and repressed in a lot of ways. So it's done, I think what they've done for the country has been pretty phenomenal, just by getting out there and being on the streets and yelling at the authorities and whatnot. And I mean, they like to say, oh, we take a little bit of credit for what's happened since in the Maidan and whatnot. Because they were screaming out against Yanukovych for 4 years, you know, and finally everything's starting to unravel, and partly it's because there are lots of groups like them on the streets, like for ages, saying this is wrong, like this has got to change. So yeah, I mean, I feel like they're not saving any women in particular, and there's no real achievable, you can't like write down, oh, this is what they did, A, B, and C, but there's just a change in like the atmosphere, and just it's just more open as a whole society there now, I think.
I want to be fair? Yes. And then we'll move forward. So yes, you.
Yeah, I see you painting like a picture of Femen's new Paris as being like maybe a shift more inclusivity, but I think like something that's not maybe captured in the film because of the timing is a lot of the criticism that they've had to endure as a result of like some very kind of Islamophobic and xenophobic protests, like anti-niqab protests. And I don't know if that's something that you felt was a missed opportunity in being able to tell the full story about them in that context now, and the political culture there, and this very like white feminist movement, and how that fits in with the kind of picture you're painting.
Okay, so I'll just repeat that. I hope I summarize it properly and a little bit shorter. You obviously had to make a lot of selections in what you would include. Some of the criticism that they received, this audience members wanting to know about the non-white issues that are brought up, if I'm summarizing that enough, like the xenophobic and the anti-niqab movements. Did that come up, and was it a conscious decision to have that or not have that? Was it timing? Tell us.
It came up a little bit like when they go to Turkey and protest. Some of the girls said some pretty racist stuff in those interviews, and I need you to not hate these women. So, I mean, a lot of it, there was a bit of selective editing in that ways, because I thought, wait, that's not the story I'm telling right now. Like, I was more about gender and patriarchy and feminism and their ideas about it. But especially this Islamophobe and the topless jihad, which they declared last year, it's a controversial thing because it's also partly part of, it's quite a French issue, and France is quite racist, and I feel like there's a lot of problems there, and that sort of stems from the French activists in a lot of ways, and it's not necessarily a Ukrainian influence as much. I mean, I think the Ukrainians are very ignorant to what's going on in the Middle East and whatnot, but the French are too, so it's messy. It doesn't really relate to, like, I chose to tell the story to the point where they got free of this guy, or is the question mark is will they, and they did, luckily, successfully. But yeah, there's a whole nother film in that, and actually, yeah, there probably are people making that film right now.
Femen Part 2,
Yeah.
2015 HotDocs. Yeah. Oh,
Have you ever personally participated in one of those protests?
Why do the men always ask that question?
the question is, did you ever personally take part?
No, but I got asked every day because they never have enough girls to do it. So it's always like, oh, Kitty, just this once. And my argument was like, well, who's going to shoot it? And they're like, oh, good point. So yeah, I got out of it because I always had my camera with me, so that was handy.
I did promise to go to you
So
next
there
year.
was the chains of Victor and the chains of patriarchy, and whatever happened to the criminal charges and the potential of prison. I don't know if that was explained.
So can you talk a little bit about the potential for prison, summarize that, the criminality aspect?
Yeah, so I mean, there was always threats of that, but they never really followed through. Those court cases take years to like really put them in jail. It's not as quick as in Russia where they'll just throw a Pussy Riot in and lock them away. So it would have taken ages for that to settle itself. In the end, the girls had criminal cases against them. It was unsafe for them to live in Ukraine. But the real reason for them, they'll say that's the reason they left Ukraine, but the real reason was this tyrannical man that was kind of at the helm, and that's what I wanted to portray. Ina actually went back after that and cut a cross down in defense of Pussy Riot, which was widely publicized. She had a chainsaw and cut this huge cross down in the Maidan, and that was another reason why she had to leave. But I mean, yeah, ultimately it was them trying to escape this kind of this patriarchal force within their own group.
Okay, sadly we have time only for 2 more questions, so I'll go to you and then I'll go to you, sir. So yeah.
It feels like you made a lot of discoveries in the course of filming. I'm just wondering what you went in expecting to find and how that changed as you were filming.
So what did you expect to find, and did you find that or other things as well?
Yeah, I didn't expect that. Yeah, I had this very noble, beautiful idea, women in like beautiful wreaths fighting for feminism, and maybe they got it a little bit wrong, but that was cool. But then, yeah, I speak Ukrainian and not Russian. Victor speaks Russian, so he would be around the movement, and I didn't really understand exactly what his role was. I couldn't understand what he was saying to them, but it was about 4 months in that I learned enough Russian that I could really tell what he was saying, and it really shocked me, and it scared me, and it upset me, and I wanted to leave and go home, and thought, that's it, I abandon it, I can't be part of this. They would be like, yeah, he'd be screaming at them at the night, and then the next morning they'd be holding up banners saying, this is the new feminism. And I thought, oh gosh, really? But yeah, it was a choice, and I thought, well, okay, I stay and I potentially ruin a movement which is doing nice things for Ukraine, or can they move forward? And so it was this huge battle between, all right, I'm not going to do this if it's just going to tear them down. If I see that they can make a leap forward, and I believe they really can, then I'll stay and stick it through. And luckily I could see it in Ina, and the rest of the girls slowly cottoned on. I think I was there as they were just getting to travel internationally. I think they were meeting other feminists. They were discovering that this wasn't quite right, what was going on in their own organization. So it was sort of good timing in that respect. But also I was there, and my cinematographer's a man, and I would yell at him, and they would be surprised by our relationship. So I think being exposed to all of that was sort of, yeah, it was good to be there at that moment. But at the same time, I think, yeah, it was just little forces, and that kind of changed everything. And yeah, I was lucky enough to capture it and sort of poke and prod and made sure it went ahead. So yeah, I think that answers your question. I'm sorry, I'm on Australian time. I apologize.
So we have just that one last question, and it will be yours.
Yeah, I see that there's a huge problem in the Ukraine, which is the whole point of the founding their movement in the first place. If that moved to France, how are they going to influence, what is their plan, long-term plan to influence Ukraine movement?
So the question is, it starts in Ukraine, they've moved to France. What is their long-term plan? Can they bring it back home? Can they repatriate this to bring about the change that they originally had wanted to start in Ukraine?
A really good question. And I mean, a lot of people struggle with what are Femen doing in France? Like, do we need them in France? Do we need them in Europe? Somebody asked if I was going to take them to Australia, and I thought, no, stay away. But it's like, I love them, but it's weird in countries where it's not as like patriarchal and not as oppressive. It's like, do they have a role, and what is their role? And I think they're coming to terms with that and trying to work out what their role is exactly. And in terms of what's going on in Ukraine at the moment, they're not really a part of that, which has been kind of odd. But Ina says, well, and our role is to open people's eyes up to what's going on and to show people that this is wrong. And Ukraine gets that now. They're aware now. We don't need to be there now. We need to be in the countries, and this is why they're talking about the Middle East, where women aren't aware of their rights and women aren't aware of like just exactly what they're capable of. So yeah, I think their role, as they see it, is to be kind of role models for young women. And I don't know. I really hope they can achieve something. And they're really clever girls, and they have a bright future. So, yeah.
So we'll look forward to Femen Part 2 when you come back.
Oh, yeah. We'll see. Maybe someone else will direct Part 2. We'll see.
I want to thank, first of all, the film's distributor, Cinefil, for sharing the film with us, and certainly to you, Kitty, that you've been on a massive tour already, starting in Venice and coming to Toronto, and it continues for you and this work. So we thank you very much for bringing Ukraine as a brothel here.
Thanks for coming.
Don't forget to vote, and we'll see you at more Hot Docs.
Thanks.